I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL wire site that covers the Arizona Cardinals, as we continue with the opponent preview series with 14 shows in 14 days, all about the Cardinals' 14 2025 opponents. We are on the schedule. We now focus on the Cardinals' Week 12 battle, which they will have at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And for the second time in this opponent preview series, we have Paul Bretl, who manages not only the Colts Wire, who we heard about for the Week 6 matchup against the Indianapolis Colts just a few days ago. He's back. Paul Bretl, who runs the Jaguars site, Jags Wire. Paul, welcome to the show. How have you been?
I'm excellent. Happy to be back talking football.
And so let's look at, in this show, we're going to talk about Jacksonville's 2024 season, what they did in the offseason, kind of what the expectations are for the coming season. Jacksonville, who, had a disappointing season, to say the least. Doug Peterson, they went 4-13. Trevor Lawrence played only 10 games. Mac Jones came in, started 7. They ended up 4-13, which led to sweeping changes. Doug Peterson is out, but they were 26th in points scored, 27th in points against, and they started the season 0-4. They never won more than one game in a row. Their wins were two over the Titans. As we know, the AFC South isn't the strongest, and the Titans were the worst team in the NFL. They had wins over the Colts, wins over the Patriots, and 2 wins over the Titans. What was the 2024 season for Jacksonville?
The record kind of tells it all, right? And if you're gonna not have Trevor Lawrence on the field, obviously that's gonna impact your play. But I think, looking at the various units, and Liam Cohen, the new head coach, from very, very early on in his tenure, said one of the big things that has to improve this year is the offensive line play. I mean, that's where, if Trevor Lawrence is going to determine your ceiling, right, as your quarterback for the offensive line plays a big role in determining what the consistency looks like for that unit. So that's a group that has to be better. And even with Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker at the defensive end positions, by pressures, were 2 of the most productive defensive ends in football last season. The overall play of that defensive line against both the run and the pass was inconsistent. The secondary gave up way too many big plays. So it's one of those situations where there's a lot of different things that we can look at and say, all right, this has to improve, and that's been reflected in the offseason that the Jaguars have had so far. By my count, of the full 90-man roster, 46 players this year are new. Were not on the team last year. So new GM James Gladstone has come in. He's overall this roster brought in his guys, because again, as we just highlighted, there's a number of different positions where much improved play is needed.
We look at last season offensively, there was really one bright spot, and that was the play of rookie receiver Brian Thomas, a guy, I'll be honest, I liked, but I didn't like as a solid number one. I thought he would make a really good complementary, but he was much better than I thought he would be as kind of the guy. Catching 87 passes for almost 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. How good was Brian Thomas as a rookie?
He was excellent. He was lights out, and you highlighted the numbers. And I think what adds to the impressiveness of that is, again, Trevor Lawrence missed a lot of games last season, and he was still productive. Defenses knew in the passing game where the ball was going, and he was still highly productive. So really, really impressive rookie season. And the new coaching staff, specifically Grant Udinski, the offensive coordinator, has talked about how there's still more out there for him. And that's not only in terms of production opportunities, but how he's utilized. We're in this Liam Cohen offense. We're going to see a lot more movement from the wide receivers. So we're going to see more of Brian Thomas Jr. lined up in the slot. We're going to see more of him attacking different levels of the field and doing so in a variety of ways. So his role in terms of what's asked of him in year two within this offense is going to expand. And with that can obviously come more production potential, but with the eyes that I think are going to be on him this season from opposing defenses and defensive coordinators as they put game plans together. I mean, he's someone who can be a force multiplier, right? Where it's not only his stat column, right, that he's able to fill, but the attention he draws, the potential mismatches he creates can help create for other pass catchers in the Jaguars offense.
Defensively, they got production out of Trayvon Walker, looking like the guy who was worth the top pick in the draft. Although Aiden Hutchinson still seemed like how can you not pick Aiden Hutchinson? But Trayvon Walker has developed and become a very nice player. Josh Hines Allen, as you mentioned, 8 sacks. But the pass rush production kind of disappears after that, after Walker and Hines Allen. What other highlights and lowlights come from the defense?
Yeah, along from a pass rush perspective, as you mentioned, those two are highly productive, but that defensive tackle position, they just didn't get enough production from that group. And the defensive end depth after Hines Allen and Walker on that depth chart, again, was not something that was where the Jaguars got enough of last season. So some big changes we've seen last offseason. Gladstone's really prioritized the defensive end depth. He's brought in 3 veterans in free agency to help boost that production behind those two. Eric Armstead, who was signed last offseason and played a lot of defensive end for the Jaguars, he's moving back to defensive tackle, where he had some of his most productive years while with the San Francisco 49ers. So that can hopefully help, boost the production there. A year 2 jump from Mason Smith, an early round draft pick last year. And I think a big part of the equation as well is going to be Anthony Campanile as the new defensive coordinator and the system that he's going to run. From how Mason Smith described, it sounds like it's a much more attacking play style. I think there's the potential for more simulated pressures, more blitzes, which of course can then help the defensive front with the chaos, the confusion that's caused. So I think all of those different facets are going to play a part in elevating the overall play of that unit.
Coming next on the Rise Up Red podcast, the best our Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move on to the offseason. New coaches, new players, draft, free agency. That's coming up next on Rise Up Red.
I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
We're back on the Rise Up Red podcast, best of Cardinals talk on the web as we now move to the offseason, the moves that the Jaguars have made. Obviously, the first one is the change front, and that is with Liam Cohen, who made waves with saying Duval wrong, which was, I'm saying, it was hilarious. It's who else. What have been the takeaways so far of Liam Cohen as head coach?
I think one of the big ones is just and you hear the players talk about this constantly, it's just the energy that he brings, as the head coach, leader of this Jaguars team. And from an offensive standpoint, I mean, one of the key words that I would use to describe is multiplicity. There's going to be a variety of different looks, a variety of different formations, a lot of different things that the Jaguars are going to throw at opposing defenses. Cohen comes from the Sean McVay coaching tree out in with the Rams, and within that coaching tree, we've heard the phrase, the illusion of complexity, right? And in part, what that means is running a variety of plays from just a few personnel groupings, right, to help create mismatches, to keep defenses off balance and guessing. It's like plays, right? Plays, concepts that build off of each other as the game goes on. So two plays might start the same, but they end up being completely different. So those are going to be key components of what this offense brings. And Trevor Lawrence has said that it's a system that gives you all the answers, but it also puts a lot on the plate of the players because it's a robust playbook. There's so much that comes with it. So from that respect, schematically, Jaguars are going to be hopefully in a position where the scheme can help with some of the heavy lifting, right? When it comes to making plays, creating mismatches, putting players in positions to maximize their skill sets and go out there and be successful. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, and this just isn't Jaguars, this is football in general, all 32 teams, you can have the greatest play ever drawn up on paper, but if it's not executed properly, if your players aren't put in positions to maximize what they do well, the overall effectiveness of it probably isn't going to be there. So I think Cohen, what he does really well, and Eric Armstead has talked about this, his communication, right? Checking in with the players. How do you feel about this? Here's what we're going to do. I think that's how you really maximize the guys that you have on the roster.
When we get to the offseason moves with players, they traded receiver Christian Kirk, former Cardinals first-round pick. Starting center Mitch Morse retires. And then a whole bunch of guys leave. Mac Jones, he signs with the 49ers. Luke Farrell, tight end, signs with the 49ers. They release Evan Ingram. They release Gabe Davis. Josiah DeGuara, special teams tight end, signed with the Cardinals. Andre Sisco, safety, to the Jets. Anybody that left in free agency considered an impact loss?
I mean, you look at, obviously, Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk, what they do or what they've provided, especially in the passing game for this Jaguars team. And initially your thought is when those moves are made, like, all right, who's going to step in and fill those roles for the Jaguars? But like I said, the roster turnover that they've had this offseason, I mean, James Gladstone, there's always going to be an element of that, right, when there's a new GM, but he's come in and made a lot of really, really quick changes to this team. So those are two players that stand out, but taking over at tight end is going to be Brenton Strange. And organizationally, the Jaguars are extremely, extremely high on what he can provide this team. There's the passing game presence, but he brings a well-rounded skill set. They talked about his versatility, his ability to impact the running game. And when you have that at tight end, there's this element of unpredictability that is added to the offense. Without Christian Kirk, he was primarily a slot receiver. And as mentioned, I think we're going to see more of Brian Thomas Jr. there. And again, with how Cohen wants to operate this offense, there's going to be a lot of movement from those wide receivers in terms of where they're lined up. So I think we're going to see a number of different players help, be the slot receiver in this offense. I don't know that there's going to be a specific, this is our slot receiver. I think it's going to vary kind of based on what the game plan calls for, who the opponent is. But again, Ingram, Kirk, two highly productive players. So you're always going to wonder, all right, where's that production now going to come from?
In free agency, the additions they made, receiver De'Ami Brown, tackle Chumadoga, former Cardinals linebacker Dennis Gardeck, for special teams and some edge play. They have a new center in Robert Hainsey, signed for 3-year, $21 million. They add Fred Johnson tackle, Jordan Lewis, slot guy from the Cowboys. They remade the tight end route, Hunter Long and Johnny Munt and Quentin Morris, all added. Safety Eric Murray, one of their bigger deals, 3 years, $19.5 million. They had depth on the edge with Emmanuel Ogbah, previously with the Dolphins. Of the guys that they brought in, who are expected to make, you already spoke about Morris, who are the ones that are expected to make the biggest impact this coming season?
I think we start in the secondary with Jordan Lewis and Eric Murray. I mean, they're going to bring experience to the back end of that defense. Jordan Lewis is primarily going to fill in as the Jaguars' slot cornerback. Eric Murray is going to be one of the starting safeties. And Campanelli, the defensive coordinator, has talked about how he believes both of them are elite communicators. And as he's described it, that's the foundation for strong play in the secondary, right? Getting everyone set, getting everyone on the same page pre-snap, making adjustments as needed. So that experience that they have is going to help provide some stability to that unit. Then I look at the offensive line. I mean, between free agency and the NFL draft, they've made 6 additions to the offensive line. They've added a ton of versatility, and they're really going to lean into competition. I'm sure they have who they believe their starting 5 will be come week 1, but I don't know how many of those players are sharpied in at this time. I think there's going to be a lot of mixing and matching. I think there's going to be a lot of, trying to figure out, all right, who is our best starting 5 configuration? And so that's going to be a really interesting, competition, training camp battle amongst that group to watch as the summer unfolds. Last player I'll highlight is wide receiver De'Ami Brown. His production during his time with Washington has been modest. He had the big games in the playoffs, 229 yards in Washington's 3 postseason games. But he's someone who's come in, and James Gladstone said this from the jump. They view him as an ascending player. And he's someone who's caught Cohen's attention. He's caught Trevor Lawrence's attention so far. And what he brings is a vertical presence with his speed, someone who you can get, short area throws, design touches, get him in space, let his yak ability take over. But Cohen's talked about how impressed he's been with those intermediate routes. So again, we look at what they want to accomplish. You want receivers who can be moved around, receivers who can run a variety of routes. And he's going to be a part of that kind of core 3 receivers on this Jaguars team with Thomas and Travis Hunter.
And forgot to even mention Patrick McCarry, who was their biggest free agent addition from the Ravens. And so that offensive line has been remade, especially with the retirement of Mitch Morse. Let's go to the draft, where obviously the biggest thing that they did was the surprise trade up, the surprise trade up to number 2 to get Travis Hunter, the 2-side star. I guess it doesn't basically the draft kind of hangs on him, doesn't it? With the expectations for him. What is the expectation from Travis Hunter? Is he going to be more offense or more defense this year?
That's a great question. And, as James Gladstone, the GM, has described, that playing time, I'm sure internally they have, all right, here's kind of what we're aiming for, but this is going to be a very fluid situation. But the playing time in season, week to week, as Gladstone has described, is going to be a lot of times, I think, based on the game flow. I think he's even said that one week to the next might not look the same, right? What's the matchup? How's the game unfolding? All those different elements are going to be factors in, all right, how many snaps on offense or defense does he take? But the Jaguars are fully committed to him playing on both sides of the football. And through offseason programs, he's been in the defensive meeting rooms, learning the playbook, all that stuff. But on the practice field, he's had more days during OTAs and minicamp where he was working at wide receiver. Reason for that, as Gladstone described, is they view cornerback as Hunter's more natural position. I also think, again, I mentioned Cohen's robust playbook. I think getting him acclimated to that as fast as possible was a part of the equation, if I had to guess as well. And once we get to training camp, we're going to see him playing both sides of the ball during the same practices regularly. Because during OTAs and minicamp, he was either only on offense or only on defense, depending on what day it was, again, to bring him along, to get him acclimated. So that's really the next step for him in his progression. But his work ethic, coaches, players have raved about it. One of the reasons beyond what Travis Hunter obviously brings on the field as a receiver and cornerback that made the Jaguars want to move up for him is because of who he is as a person. He's a core player person within that locker room. And he's someone that they wanted to, as they move forward with this new GM head coach wanted to be at one of the core players that they build around moving forward. So he's come in, impressed so far up to this point. And again, now it's about just continuing to expand on both sides of the football.
After that, their next pick, they have 2 picks in round 3. Safety out of Tulane, Caleb Bransaw, and then West Virginia offensive line Wyatt Milam. Do either of them figure into 2025 plans?
I think potentially. Once we get beyond the Travis Hunter pick, if the rest of the draft, round 3 through 7, I would use the word competition. I think that's what they were looking to add. Bransaw is going to be in the mix for that starting safety spot next to Eric Murray. Wyatt Milam, from what's been reported by ESPN, is competing at left guard with Ezra Cleveland. So potentially they could be in the mix, find roles this season. But I think the big thing that the Jaguars want to do with this new regime that they're under is just bring in as much competition as possible. And hopefully that then raises the level of urgency, raises the level of play, you get better play from those position groups. So those 2 players, they're in the mix for playing time, but they're going to have to, compete and earn it as well.
Day 3 picks, Bashal Tutton, running back, speedster. Notre Dame linebacker, Jack Kaiser, Auburn defensive, and Jalen McLeod, another safety out of Navy, Rayuan Lane, Jonah Monheim, tackle or offensive lineman out of USC, and then the Syracuse running back, LaQuint Allen. If I had to guess, is it possible that Allen might be the one of the day 3 picks who could have the specified role as kind of a third down catching back type thing? Or obviously you've got Trevor Etienne, Travis Etienne on the roster already. I think LaQuint Allen might be, and tell me if I'm wrong, the one who could sneak into a specialized role quickest out of those day 3 guys.
Yeah, I think there's going to be the opportunity for him as a pass catcher, as you mentioned. I believe at Syracuse last season alone, he had 78 targets. And if we look at Cohen's offense, the 2024 Buccaneers, Bucky Irving and Rashad White were both top 10 in targets at the running back position. So getting that position group involved in the passing game, big part of what Cohen wants to do. Allen, as we mentioned, has that experience from Syracuse, and also too, experience lining up in the slot. It's not as if all of those targets were just, all right, no one's open, let's dump it off to him. There was a concerted effort at times to find him and make sure that he got the ball in the passing game. So I think that's an opportunity for him as well. Bashal Tutton, the running back at Virginia Tech, you mentioned his speed. And of course, with that speed comes some big playmaking potential that he has. It's going to be the running back room as a whole. You have ETN, Tank Bigsby, those 2 players. It's going to be really, really interesting to see how it shakes out playing time wise. I fully expect, if I were to guess right now, ETN, Bigsby, and Tutton to all have roles this season. But in terms of, all right, who ends up being running back 1, who gets most of the opportunities, what that looks like, to me, is one of the big unknowns. And then you factor Allen in. All right, now he's the 4th running back. Teams can keep 4 running backs, but that means you have to go light elsewhere on your roster. So that position group in particular is going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds. And mention the running backs in the running game. The running game as a whole is such a critical part of helping to make the entire Cohen offense go. We all know from a football perspective, if you're finding success on the ground, you're ahead of the sticks, you're out of predictable passing situations, sets up play action opportunities in the air, right? That's always important in football. But in Cohen's offense as well, the running concepts and the passing concepts go hand in hand. They're married together. And if one of those areas isn't as effective as needed, it can then impact the other. So having a really good running game to lean on is going to be a big part of just the overall success of this group.
Coming up next on the Rise of Sierra podcast, Best Hour Cardinals Talk on the Web. Let's move on. Let's look ahead of what can we expect from the Jaguars in 2025. That's coming up next on Rise of Sierra. We're back on the Rise of Sierra podcast, Best Hour Cardinals Talk on the Web, as we talk to Paul Bretl about the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Cardinals' Week 12 opponent. Coming off of a bad year, what is sort of expected from this team? It is coming like the Cardinals when Jonathan Gannon took over. They were a bad team. and they didn't win any more games in 2023, but they were a better team. They went from being at 2022, the 4-win team, which was a dumpster fire of the year, to 2023, where they only won 4 games, but I described them as a good bad team. They were a bad team still, but they were a good bad team because they competed every week and were tough to beat, and they were just lacking talent on that roster. What do you believe is sort of the expectations for? Is this team expected to win more games, or even if they win the same amount of games but do so in a better way, is that an okay year?
Ash, that's a great question, because we mentioned all of the change. And I have to say, the new leadership structure with Cohen, Gladstone, and Tony Baselli in there as well as the executive vice president, this team very, very much feels to me like they are absolutely on the right path. The vision that these three have for who they want the Jaguars to be, the path that they want them to go down, feels very real. And there is just this level of excitement with this team that is, you can feel it, right? So it very much feels like they're on the right track. But again, with all these so many significant changes in one offseason, what does that look like in the first season in terms of wins, losses, on field production? I mean, that is just a huge guess at this point. What I will say, to your point, of course you want more wins. And I think getting more than 4 wins is very much going to be the expectation this season, right? I think you can see a path to where this team can stack some wins and find some success. But I think, like you mentioned with the Cardinals, I think that's a good kind of measuring stick beyond just wins and losses is, do you see a team that's competitive each week? Do you see a team that's progressing? We talked about the multiplicity component on offense. Do you see a team that's difficult to defend? Do you see a team that's adapting and evolving as the season goes on defensively? You know, Campanelli, the defensive coordinator, talked about it. Of course, X's and O's, scheme, all that matters. But one of the biggest things with him is play style. Every single play, running to the football, going after the football, multiple guys bringing the offensive player to the ground. So those are some of the maybe intangible qualities that you're hoping to see from this Jaguars team. But collectively, who they have leading the way, and there is a lot of talent on this roster too. Thomas, Trevor Lawrence, Hines Allen, Trayvon Walker. You know, there's a lot of excitement with this team moving forward. And again, I really do think that they are on the right path as they progress.
What do you think their floor and ceiling is for wins this year?
Gosh, that's a good question. Floor, you know, I think they're going to be, I think just from X's and O's difference with Cohen leading the way, Campanelli leading the way on offense and defense, I think they're going to be a better team in that regard. So I think there's going to be a couple additional wins just from that. So again, we don't know what the changes are going to bring overall. You know, maybe 6 wins is the floor. Again, you look at the upside, you look at the potential that's there on the roster. You know, potentially could they get to, you know, 8, 9, 10 wins? That could be in the cards as well.
So, and we look at the Cardinals on their schedule, not talking about how the team, but kind of the perception from fans, the fan base. How do Jags fans view that road game later in the year? Do they view that game as we can win that game kind of situation? Is it, that's a tough one, like it's a toss-up, or is that, that's going to be, maybe we can steal it or no way?
I think that's one where, you know, that's in the Jaguars come off their bye week in week 8, and that Cardinals game is in the midst of kind of a difficult part of the schedule. 4 of those 5 games from week 9 through 13 are going to be on the road for the Jaguars, including this one in Arizona. So just the nature of the schedule already kind of, you know, adds to the challenge of going out to Arizona and coming away with that win. But I mean, there's a lot of optimism around this team right now. And again, I'll default to it. Just a lot of unknown as well in terms of what to expect.
Obviously, there's a lot of criticism about Trevor Lawrence, but he just got paid. So guess what? He's going to be around. I look at Trevor Lawrence's career. I see a lot of what happened to Kyler Murray. So he he built up to the playoff success and just has been, situation, like his talent is there, but the situation around him has made it so he's not as successful as he could be. And yes, because he gets a lot of the blame. There's a lot of reasons why he's not playing at the level he could be. And is this a big year for Lawrence in general in terms of perception? I don't think with the contract that he's in any danger of going anywhere, but in terms of perception, where are people at with Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. A clear point of emphasis this entire offseason has been making sure that the infrastructure around Trevor Lawrence is there, that there's more balance around him, that he doesn't have to necessarily do it all on his own consistently, right? And that started with bringing in Liam Cohen. I mentioned coming from the Sean McVay coaching tree. We've seen that system, quarterbacks within that system around the NFL flourish. We talked about the multiplicity of that scheme being able to, help create opportunities that then Trevor Lawrence can exploit. They revamped the offensive line. Like we said, 6 new additions. Consistency for any offense is going to start up there. They added a ton of speed. Bashal Tutin, Travis Hunter, De'Ami Brown. Again, a key point of emphasis has been making sure there's the proper balance around Trevor Lawrence, because the ceiling for this team, like any team, is going to be determined by the quarterback play. So why not make sure that quarterback is in the best position possible to go out there and play at a high level? So the approach, everything about it, of course, makes a ton of sense. And then now it's about, all right, carrying that over to the field and seeing that production unfold.
And with that will wrap up this edition of the Rise of Zero podcast, the best our Cardinals talk of the way. The Cardinals take on the Jaguars at home in Week 12. That's Paul Bretl. You can find his work regarding the Jags. You can also find his work with the Colts over the Colts Wire. But also, it's Jags Wire? Jaguar is a Jaguars Wire.
Jags Wire.
It's Jags Wire because officially my site is Cardinals Wire, but the URL is Cards Wire. So everything they put out, it's kind of a mess. Like on Presto, it says Cardinals Wire, but there is literally nothing that we call Cardinals Wire. It's Cards Wire. So Jags Wire, you can follow Paul's stuff, and on social media, on Twitter, on X, you can find his content there on the Jags Wire as well. Thanks for coming on, Paul, for the second time this offseason. Hope to talk to you later on in the year. Thanks for listening as always. We'll be back again soon. We've got a couple more opponent previews coming up, and then Seth and I will be back to do our training camp preview. Thanks for listening as always.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise Up, Red Sea, Be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.